Welcome to the Power of Africa Conference 2023. I am Dr. Temitope Adiola Kinshimoy. I am the moderator and a panelist on the Politics and Leadership session. I am from Lagos, Nigeria. I am an administrator, humanitarian, writer, and founder Diola Speaks. Diola Speaks is a research and governance platform. We meet to discuss today. I have amazing people, technocrats, and partisans from all around Africa. I'd like to introduce Miss Amara.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amara Chukwu Nwankokoro. I am the founder of Iruka and Lilies Africa. I'm from Nigeria. I am a author, a content creator, and a social development advocate. I'm really big on politics and leadership, so I'm very excited for this conversation today.
I also have with me Mr. Manji.
Hi everyone, my name is Manju Wilson. I am from Nigeria, residing in Abuja, Nigeria. I am the regional director for Lead Beyond. Lead Beyond is an organization that works on empowering leaders with essential skills to transform them through crisis, conflict, and change. I have been working in the democratic governance sector for about a decade now. I'm quite excited to join this panel where we'll be exploring the issues of politics, citizens' engagement, and leadership on the continent. So good to be here. Thank you, Temitope.
I also have with me Mr. Mitri. You're muted, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mitri Manik. I'm from Liberia. I do live in the US currently. I am the founder of the Organic African Paradigm, which is a philosophy for development, human development of African people across the planet. It is a philosophy based on five pillars: political, intellectual, economical, social, and spiritual pillars. And I'm very happy to be participating in a discussion of politics and leadership in Africa for future generations. Thank you for having me.
With me here is also Mr. Eddie Chris.
Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing today? My name is Mwila Wanga, and I'm from Zambia. I'm an executive director for an international organization that works wholly in Southern Africa, focusing boldly on governance and leadership development for young people. And I'm also a governance expert and author of 5 books and an enthusiast when it comes to politics and governance across the African continent. I'm super excited to be here today and to contribute to the conversation that we're going to have. Thank you so much, and over to you, moderator.
I do not know if Mr. Honorable Kalawale is here, but if we don't have him on screen, I'd like to introduce our topic for today, which is enhancing citizenship participation in government leadership in Africa. And we're going to be discussing a practical approach. My first question today would be going to Miss Amara. You are a social advocate, you're a developmental person. Do you think that women have enough representation in the governance in Nigeria, most especially in Africa at large?
Thank you so much for that question. So yes, I am a social development advocate. I studied law in school, and I'm really big on politics. Do I think women are represented in politics in the development space? No. Of course, yes, we've had a lot of women who have come up and done amazing things. So it's never to come down on those women. Even women like myself who have even tried to take up the plate of trying to be involved in government. But I think a lot of things that stand against women is number one, there's not enough education to the woman. I want to first come from that end because I think a lot of women don't take out the time to educate themselves when it comes to leadership skills, when it comes to having that manly approach when it comes to things. That's a lot of times what those industries are considered. They're considered male dominated industries. So a lot of women don't take out the time to develop themselves in those areas. And then when they do, they're seen as aggressive. they're seen as intimidating, they're seen as rude. And I think what I would say to a lot of women, number one, is to step out and be what they think that you're not going to be. And it's not like a aspire to perspire speech, but more so in the fact of there needs to be a lot more women representative. I remember in 2019, I believe, when Obiageli Ezekwesili wanted to run for office, I was in university at Texas Southern University in Houston. And I know how much I was so excited and so happy to see a woman doing something that I would love to do in the future. So if we had more women representatives, it would give more hope to women like me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Manik, Mr. Mitri, you're from Liberia, and Liberia gave us the first African woman president in person of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. How do you think other African countries can replicate this experience in our system of governance?
The sister there spoke of it. Amara Chukwu said it best, that the educating of women does facilitate that system which you're speaking of. Now, I'll give you an example of Rwanda. For Honorable President Paul Kagame himself stated that about 60% of his cabinet or his government institution is run by women. And I do adhere to this phenomenon or this policy that Africa as a continental body, the institution should be governed in that fashion, 60 to 40% female ratio to male ratio, just for the sake of organization and synchronization and just making things neat and organized. So that's my take on that matter, And I'm glad that Helen Johnson Sirleaf was able to inspire so many people, but we need to take it to the next level. We need to look at Rwanda's model and apply it to all of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wilson is from Nigeria, Mr. Chris Eddy from Zambia. You both are governance experts. What do you think is lacking in our system of governance in Africa? Mr. Eddy, you go first, and Mr. Wilson followed.
Thank you so much for that question, moderator. I think before we can even answer that question, I think it's also important to highlight the fact that I think as an African continent, for the past 50 years, the democracy has been existing on the continent. I think we've fairly done well for ourselves. We've been able to, trump out certain, issues that might be a threat to the successy. But some of the issues I think that are beginning to miss is the aspect of representation, because representation in itself is very important. When we talk about youth representation and we also talk about women representation, I think this is not something that we just need to be talking about in the political circles to a point where it literally just becomes tokenism, where we have these conversations, but definitely these don't culminate at the grassroots level. So I think representation in certain political spaces is something that we really have to take into consideration, because the biggest issue that has always been there is that there are certain people at the political helm that have held on to power for a very long time, but they fail to bring certain young people within the actual space. I remember running for office in Zambia in the year 2021 during our general election. In a race of 5 candidates, I was able to come out third, but I never had it easy because there were people who were actually trying to castigate a young person running for office to say, you are young, focus on making money. You are young and focus on doing this. So there's a lot of stereotype that has been placed on young people when it comes to them running for political office. And also, as Amara said, when it comes to women, there's a certain stereotype that is granted to them when it comes to running for political office. So representation is a remedy that will help us to cement the kind of Africa that we want to see as regards the political framework and also the governance infrastructure of our continent.
Thank you. Mr. Manji, please, can you go ahead?
Well, thank you, Temitope, and of course my colleagues for the previous points that you've raised. This is a very, very topical issue on the continent at the moment. As you and I are aware, we are really, really having a period of democratic backsliding. Now, it's not just a continental problem. This is a global issue. Globally, democracy is in regression. We have to establish that, as a first, point, for everyone to not begin to think that the issues that are, bedeviling the continent are unique or only to the continent. Secondly, with politics, I would say politics it's a very expensive venture. Now, expensive in terms of resources that we put into it. So whether human resources or financial resources, or any other resource that we bring into politics, it is usually a very costly venture. Thirdly, as Gloria Steinem said, power, can be taken but not given. Now, I heard one of my colleagues earlier, mention about the 60 to 40% ratio in Rwanda, which is quite, a very, very good, example that we all reference. However, we know that in practical terms, when we talk about such affirmative actions, or special measures to ensure that inclusion of women, or marginalized groups, are brought to the front burner of political discourse, it does not really materialize. But what are the issues? And these are the questions we're trying to interrogate, because this has been a recurring issue. Most recently, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen elections in Nigeria, we've seen elections in Sierra Leone, and we can see the outcome of these elections. There are about three key issues for me that stand out as to why we are having some of the problems that we have on the continent of Africa. One of the issue is citizens' trust in government, citizens' trust in public institutions and public officials that are elected or appointed to represent them in such capacities. There is that deficit of trust between citizens and their representatives. Of course, quite a number of issues, are closely tied to that. You can look at the transparency of how we run our operations, and how we conduct, our acts of public service. These are issues that have really deepened the trust deficit that we are witnessing on the continent. Another issue is the accountability of public officials. Now, we rarely have mechanisms that hold public officials to account, and where they are found wanting, to have committed certain social ills or vices, there are no punitive measures or, those legal, punitive mechanisms that are put in place are not enforced to ensure that these public officials, are held into account. And this sort of, impacts the level at which citizens' participation, in public service or engagement with the public service, is being rated. A third core issue I look at is government's responsiveness now to citizens' demand. Now, ideally, the public service, is sort of a social contract, like we know, between citizens and government or elected representatives. But this doesn't seem to be, a direction that public service institutes or public servants on the continent look at. And while it is quite, impressive to continue to admire, some little gains, I would say recently I spoke on the Mo Ibrahim Index for African Governance, which sort of looked at, the indices between 2012 and 2021 on what is happening with democracy. And I will tell you, participation rights and inclusion have been on the decline steadily, over the years. Of course, to a large extent, you would see that equality, or opportunities for women has been gradually witnessing increase. Of course, as Mitri has rated, when you look at countries like Rwanda and other countries, you'll be able to see some sort of ray of hope in that direction. But these are the issues. These three core elements, you may not cluster them as issues that are related to that, but these three core elements are really foundational to some of the issues we're having. Because once you look at those elements, then we can begin to talk about the issues of security. You can begin to talk about the issues of economy. What about the socioeconomic impact of certain issues and decisions, as it relates to, the continent and citizens as well. So I'll leave it at that for now before we deep dive into other issues.
Thank
Sorry,
you,
can
everyone. Okay.
I wanted
Please go
to
ahead.
add on. Yes, I really love everything that was said. I 100% about the same mindset. I just wanted to add on to the comments in regards to I think you said 60/40 with women being in. I think what I want to just basically say is, of course, I think it's beautiful when we see an uprise in things and in women being involved in different sectors, right? But like Maggie said, I think it would be like a me playing myself in a sense for me to say, oh yeah, because I see that things are changing. So I think one of the things that we have to remember is this industry, as politics and leadership, is considered a male dominated industry, and males have primarily identified what the standards for these sectors are, right? So a lot of women are not involved in these sectors. Now yes, there has been an uprise in it, but if we sit and just make it seem as if because we're seeing one or two things happening, that things are being solved, and that's a problem because there actually are a lot of opportunities in Nigeria specifically when as it pertains to women, as it pertains to youth. But the problem is there's not enough people that know about these things. For example, there are tons of youth governing bodies or youth representative bodies in Nigeria. I myself was a part of one which I left for two reasons. Number one, this is an opportunity that is supposed to be available to Nigerian youth. This is their ability to be able to speak up in government. The ability these most of these governing bodies also have a say so in bills that get passed for Nigerian youth in this country. They have a say so. It comes across their tables. But then who do you see representing there? Majority people that are from the north, and it's nothing against that, but it's for the fact that it's very obvious that this opportunity is not spread out to everybody. I've asked tons of youth when I joined this governing body in particular if they knew anything about anything like this, and I can give you a rough estimate that 10 one maybe 1 out of 10 people did not know what I was talking about. Then you have the other side of it where you have passionate people who want to be involved in politics, who want to get their feet wet, and then they're women, and they get into these spaces and you're told things like, if you don't sleep with me you won't get a budget. There's no representative for that. There are people that are heads of women affairs in this country and other countries, but they're not saying anything about these issues because we deem them as irrelevant or something we need to figure out later. I have an issue when it comes to our leaders or even our young people who are in leadership when they neglect issues like this because it doesn't affect them. And I'm primarily talking about the male leaders. But yes, that's basically just what I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to state that since the democratic expansion in the early 90s, several countries have adopted constitutions that enshrined a Bill of Rights, which fully domesticated international and regional treaties on civil and political rights. This new wave of constitution incorporated democratic values such as rule of law, political accountability, good governance, multi party democracy, and an end to political marginalization. This, to a large extent, promoted stability, legitimacy, accountability, and acceptance in the African political sphere. Nevertheless, with this progress, a number of African countries such as Botswana, Ethiopia, Namibia, Rwanda, South Africa, Tanzania are still dominated by a single political party. However, even though single parties are dominant in countries such as Nigeria, Botswana, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania, they have become even more liberal. However, the influx of multiple democratic party system on the continent has not been translated into a much needed democratic dividend. So I would like to ask Mr. Chris Edie, do you think we need to tweak democracy, more in an effective government leadership and in beneficial of the people? Do you think we need to do a little bit tweaking here and there? What's your input?
Thank you so much. But but first and foremost, allow me to comment on the statement that was earlier made. The earlier stated that South Africa, Tanzania, and a few other countries they've been dominated by a single political party for quite some time. I really don't think there's anything wrong with that to some degree, because if we look at it from the Western context, right, we've had the Republicans and the Democrats for over 300 years. They've been at the dominance of political power in and out. When we go to Britain, when we go to the UK, we've had the Labour Party, we've had the Conservative Party that have been in power for quite some time, and to some degree. So, but what we also get to notice, especially for countries when we come to a country like South Africa, we have the ANC, we have the EFF, we have the DA, we have various political parties, and to some degree, there's a way that people intend to vote for these political parties in one way or another. So when it comes to the actual fabric of Africa's democracy and the governance architecture that we have in itself, I remember I was privileged to be one of the keynote speakers during the 2021 as well as the 2023 summits for democracy hosted. The 2021 that was hosted in the US and the 2023 that was hosted in Zambia partly hosted it. And during my submission, one of the things that I said is that in as much as we appreciate the manner in which Africa came to be on the African continent in the early 1990s. But one of the things that we also have to now begin looking into as a continent is how do we begin to define democracy from an African context to a point that it begins to speak with, democracy that speaks an African tone, democracy that speaks the African narrative, democracy that speaks with an African culture, democracy that speaks the African language. Because it's also amazing that we can easily just copy and paste every single little tenant that has been established in the whole entire fabric of democracy, and we say this is how we are going to move. But then for us as future generations, and also the leaders that are currently holding on to certain powers right now, and I think we're beginning to see a whole new wave of African leaders. I was privileged when I heard President William Ruto when he stated that there is need for us to have an independent financial architecture that begins to look at Africa as an equal partner when it comes to international development. So I think one of the things I would also love to state, borrowing to what my leadership, Mr. Wilson, said, is that the first thing that we have to do in order for us to strengthen our politics as Africa is, number one, let us first and foremost define what does democracy mean to us as an African continent. And I think President Kwame Nkrumah put it rightly when he said that in order for us to cement and to strengthen the kind of Africa we want to see, we have to ensure that the governance architecture is African birthed, African developed, and African run. And thirdly, the other thing that we also have to do is that in as much as we complain about how colonialism has distracted us, about how slavery has messed us up, it is now also up to us as an African people to begin putting our house in order and begin telling ourselves, comrades, there's corruption. How do we deal with it? Comrades, there's bad leadership. How do we deal with it? Comrades, we don't have women represented. How do we deal with it? Comrades, we have neglected the marginalized communities. How do we deal with it? The moment we also begin to have an inward look, inwardly we begin looking at ourselves and the errors we are also committing on the African continent, it becomes easier for us to create the democracy need for the Africa we want. And I think that would be my submission to answer the question that you just asked, moderator. Over to you.
Tell me if I could add to what I totally agree with what Mwila, has submitted. Indeed, but what I just want to add, in terms of what he said is, democracy has been a concept that has been evolving over several years. So in Africa here, we're looking at 60, 70 years, and we're having conversations around, oh, this is a young democracy in comparison to, the Western world where we have also sourced this democracy from. Don't forget, I had mentioned that democracy globally is on the decline. There are countries also in the West that are now reversing and altering their methods, of deciding who lead them, as the case were. So as it is now, I think the conversations, as aptly put, is how do we strengthen our institutions? So whether we talk about the number of a two-party system or a three-party system, or whether you have multiplicity of these parties, we know that the frameworks, regional, international frameworks, support, the freedom of association. which allows people to form, whether political parties or whatever mechanisms they use, to engage, citizenry. So that should not be truncated upon, because this is also one of the issues that we've had, where constituted governments are trying to stifle, the freedom of rights and expressions and association of citizens. And this is also one of the major issues we're having. So I think importantly, unlike the West, where we would have parties where we can call them the right wing, the left wing, or we can say Democrats, or Republicans, and the ideologies they stand for. One of the major things we have to focus on, and this is a very an area of interest and passion for me, is how do we strengthen our political infrastructure? So the political parties that we have today, how do we ensure that they have a distinct marking? How do we ensure that they're able to organize the way that they should organize and engage citizens, and beyond engaging them, be able to ensure that whatever social contract they enter into with citizens, they are able to deliver, because these are the questions, we need to ask ourselves as we begin to tailor and to rethink, the sort of model that would work for us as a continent. Let's not forget, we have a lot of ethnic diverse issues. We have, issues of, regionalization. We have issues, to a large extent, religion is a huge issue on the continent. While in other parts of the world, the global south, these issues may have been addressed in one form or another. These are issues that are quite, prominent, on the continent. So how do we leverage on these issues, because we cannot discard them? How do we ensure that we are able to integrate them into the very fabric of our political metamorphosis? This is what I just wanted to add to that.
Okay, so Mr. Manji, I would like to just go back to what you have just said. Are you saying that if we have a two-party system, there's going to be enough representation of the diverse view, because you know that we are in a multi-diverse and multi-ethnic society?
No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, on the contrary, what I was submitting is that, we have a freedom of association, as guaranteed by most of the international charters and regional, charters, and even national, legislation that most countries have domesticated. So having a multiplicity of parties are not, an issue. I followed the Kenya elections. I was almost a year in Kenya last year. I've been in Nigeria. I've been following Ethiopia, and we've seen that there are always, these parties. But there's one thing that always happens. Some of the leading or frontline parties normally enter into negotiations with those that are not perceived to have the same sort of strengths that they do. And eventually they are subsumed, into those one or two. That's what eventually brings us to this one or two party system. You'll find that there's a lot of proliferation of new parties, new entrants after every electoral cycle. However, towards the election system, there's sort of a consensus to adopt, one or two of those members. So whatever works for us, if those other parties could be strengthened to perform much better, and be able to throw up a challenge for those that have been in existence for decades, and then that is all right. But where there is a two-party system, or two parties, as Muela rightly, mentioned, that have been dominant even in Western countries, it's not an issue at all. As long as these parties are able to provide the sort of government and governance model that will impact the lives of citizens. And this is the problem. Citizens in Africa do not feel the impact, the positive impact of government, and they are really disenchanted, with the way it's operated. And this is why we're having this conversation. How can we be able to ensure that we have a leadership that works, one that is effective, and one that Africans can be proud to call, to say that is representative of their own ideals as a people?
Thank you, Mr. Manji. I'd like to go back to Mr. Mitri. You talked about decolonization, when you introduced yourself. So I'd like to ask you, what are the fundamental issues with our democratic system in Africa? Do you think colonialism has an effect on the way we run our government or our system of democracy?
Yes, I do actually. So I'm going to piggyback off your question earlier, also the first question, but then I'm going to center on the second question. So you mentioned Bill of Rights, so the inherent rights of the members of the state. Now in Africa, we are called citizens, but we are not citizens. We are members of the state, actually. right?
Okay.
And they call the people in Congress the members of the state, and they call us citizens, but it's not the way. It's actually, we are the members of the state, and they are the citizens. They serve us, right?
Us.
But
Yeah.
we misunderstand the language, because one part of colonialism is that when language is translated, you get a superficial meaning of the word, right? So we talk about democratic values of Africans. Right now, democracy is essentially people acting together. That's what it means to act together, right? The Greeks were tribal people like Africans, like they were ethnic groups. And in order for them to be able to function as one, to have a mobilization and a synchronization, they had to act as one. So they created a non tribal system called democracy, where people living in the tribal states could migrate to the single state, and they could be able to function as one people to do one thing, right? In Africa, we got this wrong because we already have ethnic groups, right? And then we took on the party system. So then we ended up creating sub-ethnic groups in partism, right? Because if you look at partism, right, partism focus on defending your party. You are an adherent defender of your party's philosophy, not the nation's philosophy, not the state philosophy. You are a defender of a party philosophy. That means people came together, concocted a philosophy that was going to benefit them, elevate them, that single party, keep them in power for a long time. So we Africans, when we pick the party system, it's kind of like creating a sub-tribalism, which is not what originally democracy was. We already have ethnic group. We are supposed to create a single party system. People are supposed to move towards the single party system. Within that single party system, people vote, right? They come in an audience, they put up their hand, who all in favor? Aye. And then they create the single leader, and then that leader calls mobilization and synchronization. So when you enter democracy, you leave the trappings of ethnicity behind, and you enter as a group acting together. That is what true democracy is, right? In Africa, because of the translation, we got this wrong, right? So stability is when you're acting as one. That's what you get stability from. So in Rwanda, they are doing the true African version of democracy. In other countries that you mentioned, they are trying to go towards the true African version of democracy. The goal is for Africans to integrate into each other. We already have ethnic divisions. We are never going to get rid of those, but we need to integrate to each other. And this is where acting together comes in, where people come in, a subject is brought up, everybody votes, right? And whoever the majority within that setting, that is called democracy. Not the other way where you create a party, you go with your own agenda, and then you chastise the people who didn't vote for you, right? And then the brother said that citizens start to feel they don't feel the positive impact of government. Why? Because government is subject to the party that elected it, right? And as long as that
Yeah.
party is in power within that time frame, they're going to cater to their voters. And they will cater to their voters after their time is over, tapering towards the end. You will see them start to include the other members or the other citizens kind of superficially. Once they get elected again, then they go back to their hardcore party's belief. This is why Africa fundamentally is struggling, because we took a system that we didn't understand. That system is, we're supposed to taper from ethnic to a formal group acting together. We didn't do that. We just created subversions of it. So that covers. Did that cover? Did that cover the topic?
Kind of. Yes.
Okay.
So,
Go with the
okay.
second question because I got lost in the translation. Please go with the
Yeah.
second question.
Okay. So I asked you. I said, let me go again. I said, do you think that colonialism has an effect on our system of democratic practice in Africa?
Yes, it does. So language being key, right? It does have one of the biggest impact because we translate English to our native consciousness. So language has to be one of the main issues that Africans have to do away with for decolonization to truly begin. That means that we need to intentionally analyze every English word we use, and we need to get rid of the ones that are not serving us, right? And we need to incorporate the traditional language system, integrate them into forming a universal, a core African universal language, meaning that someone in Zambia can speak it, someone in Nigeria can speak it, as well as speak their ethnic or their native thing. But we need that one. The second part of decolonization is social values, right? Westerners have different social values, and Africans have different social values. We have suspended our social values, and we have commercialized Western social values. So Western social value is a marketing tool. They make money off of it. They sell industry. They build industry off of it. So the capital that is being built off of Western industry, social culture, we Africans are making less money out of it. Westerns are growing their economy off of their social culture. Africans need to create a core African universalism culture, meaning that this culture serves as an economical flotation device where all Africans are going to get in that economical raft. That means we spend currency, South Africa, Egypt, wherever you are, you're able to spend on African culture, right? This is about economy. We're talking about booming Africa's economy. Social culture, we have to do away with Western social culture because it's commercial. The next culture we have to deal with intellectual culture. It's also commercial, right? A lot of African books, we substitute African books, intellectual thought to Western thought, right? Socrates, I know more about Plato and Socrates, etc., right? And those, I have to buy that book, $20, $30. But if we start to create an African intellectual pool of this is a commercial, this is ways for revenue to come into the continent, right? So intellectual culture, political culture, and economical culture is the biggest thing. When we talk about Africa's economical culture, we are not just talking about exporting minerals, but we are talking about the development of institutions that are going to incorporate skill, highly skilled individuals. Theory, I say the theory needs to be about 40% theory and 60% skill, right? So that means by the time you're 10 years old in a kindergarten, you should be transitioning to skill, from theory to skill. You should be, until you graduate, you should be purely on skill. When you graduate, you are going to be a skilled person to contribute to the economy. And phasing of the foreign exploitation of our economy, we need to focus on how to phase it out. We need to first become aware of it and then phase it out. Okay? So social, economical, political, intellectual, and the spiritual, we talk about healthcare, well-being, right? We go to Western places for healthcare, for well-being, right? We need to focus more on Africa's well-being culture. If there's anything that has to do with well-being, those things need to be brought to the forefront. So that's my contribution on how we can fully decolonize. It needs to be what we need to just do it. Instead of talking about it, it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitri. I like to state that governance, in simple terms, is the action or manner of which leadership in a state and country is carried out, while politics is the principles that guide the activities and style of government. So I'd like to throw this question to Mr. Chris Eddy and also Mr. Mitri. What do you think are the roles of some? What do you think are some of the roles, of the citizens in the governance processes? Can you give us practical approach? So, Mr. Mitri, you go first. I can see that Amara wants to give us an input, so you do that, and Mr. Mitri gives us that input. I'm coming back to you, Mr. Manji.
Okay.
Okay.
Were you asking
So,
me?
Mr. Chris should go first, then Amara, you go second, then Mr. Mitri third. Okay, I think yeah, Mr. Chris, go first, please.
All right. Thank you so much. I think, I had it, but first and foremost, amazing contribution coming from Mr. Wilson and Mr. Mitri. I've been definitely schooled on so many things around colonialism. So thank you so much for that, Mr. Mitri. I think to answer the question that you've just posed, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine that was 2 days ago, and we were laughing about how citizens go to sleep immediately after the election and then complain 2 years before the next election. And I think it's literally the same thing across the African continent, right? And I think the biggest issue that we have, especially for us as citizens, and who might not hold elective positions, is that we only think our responsibility in a democratic dispensation is to vote. But that's where we intend to now create autocratic leaders who hold on to power aggressively. Why? Because we, the employers, who then put in these politicians who become our employees, we sit back, we no longer ask for reports, we no longer hold them accountable, and we no longer ensure that these people are consistently transparent. So I think the role that citizens have to play is to ensure that the people that have been put in elective positions understand that they should not be bigger than the institutions to which they are governed. Because the biggest problem I think we've also had on the African continent is that we have big boys but yet weak institutions. We have strong leaders with weak institutions. And I think that's the biggest challenge we have had on the African continent. But I think we, as citizens, we have a serious role to play to ensure that we hold our leaders accountable. And when we talk about holding our leaders accountable, not only with what they do domestically, but even with what they do at a regional level and at a global level. When my president leaves the country and he goes to another country, what is he saying about my country? What is he saying about the African continent? And how is he ensuring that he exports the values of the African continent? Because if we only hold our leaders domestically, but we don't hold them accountable to what they do when they get up there, it becomes easier for them to also sell our continent to the highest bidder. And the other issue that I'd also like to contribute on this particular matter is that on the aspect of us as citizens, let us not sit back and only critique when the need arises. But when we notice that we have to be in the act, if Amara has to run for office, in order for her to begin to see the change she wants to see, let it be so. If I have to run for office, in order for me to create the change I want to see, 2026 is around the corner in my country. I ran for office in 2021. I got 13,500 votes. I'm going to run again in 2026 because I will not sit back and only critique from the backside, but I want to see how best I can be part of the system. Because the only way to change the system, my dear colleagues, like Mr. Wilson also stated, is for us to be part of the system, borrowing with what Mr. Mitri also established. So that will be my submission on that, moderator, that as citizens, we really have to be in the heat in order for us to ensure that we cushion the environment and create the Africa we want to see.
Thank you. Over to you, Miss Samara.
Yes, first, this panel is amazing. Let me just start. And of course, the contributions as far as colonization, let me not even go because everything was spot on. But just to add on and not to repeat what he already said, I'll just leave 2 points. Number one, as far as it pertains to the citizen, there is actually the office of a citizen. And I think a lot of people don't realize this. There's an educational part of it, and then there's also a getting involved part. The educational part is when you are finding out information about your party, the wards, all those different things, getting yourself involved in education, educating yourself in topics as well too. So it's not enough for you to just come to vote at president and governor, even at the local levels and so on and so forth, and even knowing about these topics. So then during presidential debates, you know what they're talking about. I know a lot of people did not even know what these people were talking about. I know people that still don't even know what fuel subsidy is. They just see when prices are going up and down and they're like, okay, that's what that means, right? So educating yourself, number one, is the number one thing of office of the citizen. And number two is getting involved. So, like he said, if the solution is you lending your voice or is you running for office, do it by all means. And of course, I think it's very important to not let people rush into just running for office, because that's the problems that we have with our current leaders. No education, no background, no nothing, and they just go and ruin all of our lives, sincerely, right? So then that takes me to the governor part, or the government part. What is the role of somebody in governance? And I think, once again, it's education and then service and planning. I would say, number one, the education. One of the schools that I am currently enrolled in, the SPPG, School of Politics, Policy and Governance, is one thing that I wish in the future more people in office would get involved in. Why is that? Because there is no system that properly educates our African governors, or politicians in general. And the thing about this too is, it's not just for somebody who wants to run for office, but in general as well. I think the education, mastering your, broadening your mind and becoming a thought leader, so that way you can be able to know things when you're ready to run for government. And of course, service. So be understanding the fact that, okay, yes, let's not be close-minded to the fact that, yes, when you are a politician, there is a glamour that comes with it, for sure. But looking at the other side, that yes, I have that glamour part, that's the plus side, but I have a duty. And I think a lot of politicians and leaders forget that they're primarily, this is an assignment, and not so much of a job. Actually, it's more of a mission. You're meant to ensure that the lives of people are stable, and they forget that a lot, and they don't realize that truly you have the lives of people in your hands. And if you're not taking the proper steps to ensure that something, your position, is being run properly, you affect, honestly, us all in Africa, not just the country that you're presently having a position in. But yeah, hopefully that's adds on to that.
All right. So, Mr. Mitri, can you give us your contribution?
Yeah, first I want to give credit to my brother Muali or Muala, I think so, and Sister Amara Chuku and brother Maji right there. You guys are awesome. This is a good panel. I really like this fire minds here. So I wanted to piggyback off my sister Amara Chuku, what she said. She mentioned thought leaders, politics and government and education part. Right now, this is very, very crucial as when we're talking practicality, right? I did write everything you guys were saying down, and I'm going to put it, sum it all into my point here. So for us to create the practical approach is enhancing citizenship participation in government. I would say we need to establish a balance of power first. What we have is an extreme of power, meaning that those people who are in the government, they have this cognitive dissonance that they are in power, that as they believe this, they are in power, right? And they have power. And the citizens believe that they have power, and the citizens don't have power. So that's one of the imbalance. So we need to bring that scale up to even, to par, right? So the first thing for us to do this is for us to begin with a foundation of educating and imparting the philosophy of power. Now, I said decolonization, but decolonization, a lot of people stop at decolonization. I said repairing, and then I said empowerment, meaning that African people have lost the ability to be empowered or to have power. Simple, right? Just walking in the street, you are a member of state. Just a child playing on the kindergarten or playground or in ABC, that child is a member of state, but they've lost that power. They think that the people who are member of state are the parliament members. No, those are just people. You are the member of state. The child on the playground is the member of state. The policeman should not be abusing you because he thinks he's a member of state and you are an outsider. That's an imbalance of power. So the first thing we have to do is an awareness level, gauge the awareness level of citizens and government Where's the cognitive dissonance? Now, are government leaders aware that citizens are members of the state? Do they know this? You would have to take a survey, go to the government office and ask them questions, right? Ask them, are you aware that the citizens are member of the state? Do you know what the citizens are? And majority of them will not be able to tell you this. They will not be able to give you a solid answer. Now, in Africa, especially, government project themselves as bodies that control people. Their primary function is to control people. They project that self. That's not the case. It should be. It should be the people who project that power, that they control their government, right? So we need to balance that out. That's the first thing I would say. Now the solution is to door. We need to basically, you guys talk about stereotype of youth not being suitable for power. That needs to be put on the agenda list at the forefront. Topic of women not being in leadership on the educational things to educate, right? Citizens must trust in the government, like our brother Meji said, on the list of things that need to be brought. And act of public service, accountability of public officials. These are things you go door to door with a pamphlet and you educate people. These are things you go to universities, stand in front of the students and educate them. These are things you go to kindergarten and teach children this stuff and tell them, do you know you're a member of state? Do you know you have this power, right? And as you begin to conscientize that level, you begin to infuse that power, the balance will gradually shift. More people become aware of what they are there for. And then, the administration also learns that, oh, the institution says these people are afforded these rights. But people get the job in government, they forget that there are laws. They forget there are policies and things that the government wrote up. They all forget that. So that's basically my contribution, is for us to go door to door and begin the education process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitri. And in 2 minutes, please, Mr. Manji. Mr. Mitri has talked about the extreme shift of power from the citizens to the government, and you are an expert in governance. So, how do you think that we can strengthen the institution whereby the institution is greater than the politician or an elected office holder? In 2 minutes, please.
Well, of recent, I have been, asking one thing, of African leaders and those that go into public service. And what I just ask is for them to lead. I ask them to lead honorably. I ask them to lead in a manner that, they think about the legacies they want to leave behind. I ask them to lead, knowing that whatever decisions they make, would define whatever, memory, would be made, of them. And this is the conversations around our African leaders. And recently we can see them taking, some very bold moves, making some very bold statements, because we've not had African leaders, stand up to lead. What they do is to make excuses. When we talk about, of course, why governance is not working, they will tell you about global financial lending, instruments that are not favorable to Africans. They'll tell you about climate change and the COP27 agreement, $100 billion not coming. What are you doing to leverage this collective strengths you have on the continent? I think it's important for African leaders to begin to look inward, look within the continent, collaborate, between countries, between West Africa, South Africa, East Africa. When one of our countries are in distress, let's see how we can be able to rally together and support those people, take them out. Citizens must also be able to know that their voices really matter. We have seen a lot of peaceful protests in recent years. In 2020, there were several protests against, police or security brutality across the continent, in Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, South Sudan, so many countries, trying to address same issues. Our issues are very, very peculiar in this continent. I know that our issues are similar, and so our solution should also be similar. We have the African Union. The African Union must also begin to do what it needs to do, unite the continent, so that we will unite towards one goal, one direction, and that is ensuring that every single African, is uplifted, from a position of decadence or whatever rating that we have as an underdeveloped continent to one that is at par with its global counterparts. Thank you, Dr. Temi.
Thank you, Mr. Manji. And I'd like to add that according to what Mr. Chris Eddy here said, it's not just about talking, talking, and talking. What are the actions? For me, I am not in any political office, but I've been able to use my platform, to educate people. I have a column where I write often on the Punch newspaper, which is the most widely read newspaper in Nigeria. I keep making this conscious effort, to educate people, because I think most people are educated, but they do not know about these things. So I try as much as possible to bring this problem to life and also provide solutions. So in 1 minute, I'd like every one of you to state what you're doing, to make this problem, quite to just provide a solution in 1 minute. Everyone, please, just one comment each, 1 minute each. So Amarachuku first, Mr. Manji second, Chris, and Mr. Mitri.
Okay, thank you once again for this opportunity to speak, and my wonderful colleagues. Thank you so much. But I think just in 1 minute, what I would say is, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm the founder of Iruka. Basically, it's an NGO where we're empowering youth to give them opportunities and create some sort of a ripple effect to create the Africa of our dreams. And then I have Release Africa, which is an African clothing line where we're helping young children get in school. Models of buy one, give one business model. But what I would say in general, aside from those things, I think it's important, like you already mentioned, to constantly talk about the duties people have. People don't know about these things. So I think it's important to educate people. We have social media work in 2023. So I think everybody should definitely be utilizing social media. And number two, I would say innovative ideas. So I know myself and my team, we're working on a few projects to help educate young people and educate youths especially. So aside from doing things online, but then also creating textbooks, creating small notebooks for young children that they can understand. Because if you look at these other countries, they I don't want to say brainwash, that sounds very harsh, but they educate their citizens at a very young age. So us doing that, I think, is very important.
Okay, thank you, Miss Amara. Mr. Manji, please.
Well, I would just piggyback on the last point, I had raised, and I just want to emphasize on the point of solidarity. I like the work that Power of Africa is doing, and I think a lot of our institutions, Muila, Mitri, Dr. Temi, and also Amara, what we're doing, in our own, silos, in our isolated, environments, is contributing to a greater good. But I just want to also raise the issue of solidarity. We must begin to show solidarity one to another within our countries, across the continent. That is the only way we can begin to change the narrative. We can begin to change the norms that do not work for us as a continent. We can begin to change, the ideas or the boundaries that we have set, within the continent that has so far impacted, our democratic growth, or rather the advancement of our countries as it is. So let us, be able to show solidarity, even if those ideas are not ideas that we may want to run with, but if we realize that they are going to impact positively on the citizens, let us look for those opportunities and support them. So thank you to Power of Africa for bringing us together, and great panel, and thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chris Eddy. Okay, I think it's off. Mr. Mitri, please, can you take over?
Thank you so much. Julius Nyerere once said that. Hello, can you get me?
Yes, please. Go ahead, please, quickly. I think we lost him. Mr. Mitri, please, can you take over?
You can go ahead, brother, if you're
I
ready.
was saying that Julius Nyerere
Mr. Mitri, please can you?
Okay, yes, sure. I want to piggyback off the theme or enhancing citizen participation in governmental leadership. We need to dispel the cognitive dissonance, and we need to bridge the balance between citizen and government. I think this focus heavily on education. Everything we talked about, these are topics you put in the brochure. You go to schools, you go to the marketplace, to the fish lady, to the goat meat person, and you teach them about their members of state, and you explain what democracy is. Use this video as your reference point and explain these things to them. And also go to the county building and the institution and explain to them what democracy is and what their roles are. And I believe this will get rid of the cognitive dissonance, and we can start to get to the point of solidarity, like our brother Manji said. Thank you all, Positive Energy and Creation Energy, to all of you, and thank you for inviting.
Okay. Manji, please, can you quickly, in 1 minute, give us your closing comment?
My brother Muila, you mean? I already did. So
Oh,
Muila?
sorry. I mean, Chris. Yeah, Marilla, please. Please, 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, please. 1 minute.
Oh, okay,
Thank you.
perfect. I think the only last statement I want to say is that the problems of our continent are inevitable. But as a people, we have to be the inevitable solution to our continent's inevitable problems. I think the problems of Africa, they regard African solutions. I think that's what we are doing under my organization, Be Relevant Africa, where on an annual basis, we are training about 500 young people in leadership development, innovation, as well as national relevance. And thank you so much, Mr. Manji, for calling out the call for solidarity. And I think after this call, let us try by all means to see how best we can step out of our silos and work together as one. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's been an amazing session with you all. I had fun. It was interactive. I learned, and I'm sure going to take this home. And until next time, thank you for joining Power of Africa Conference 2023. I remain your moderator, Dr. Temitope Adiola Kinshimon.